Okay, welcome to DaVinci Tips and Tricks. In this episode, I'm gonna be continuing from the last one, the node tree one. I'm gonna guide you through the nodes and the structure I'm using on this grade. So this is sort of the final grade I came to, and I'm gonna guide you through the things that I've been just working on, and yeah, just to reinforce the previous chapter about my node tree structure and clip timeline level. So if I press Shift D, we disable every single grade applied completely at clip level and timeline level. Shift D, and then if you want to concentrate on disabling individual clips or groups of clips, you can select the clips and press Command D on a Mac computer. Move on so I can show you what I did. Let's go out of full screen. The same idea as I explained before. We're coming here. This was shot on a Sony camera S-Log3, Sony Gamut 3 Senior S-Log3 into DaVinci Resolve Wide Gamut. As you can see here, I'm using my ODT, which I have it at the timeline level. So starts here, the DaVinci Wide Gamut sandwich, and it ends at this point, and I'm going to explain why it ends at this point, and then I continue with some other nodes after the ODT. So timeline level is something that will affect the whole timeline, your whole project. So in this case, I have these 4 clips. If you are accustomed to a layer-based NLE, which is this is a layer-based NLE when we're editing, so this is not too different from what you use on other software, just like Premiere Pro. So that timeline level would be sort of the equivalent of getting an effect on top of everything that's below. But this is not the point, and the point is for us to start seeing the grade as a more structured process. And if you will, if you watch a film, most films would have just one show LUT, and when I say show LUT, don't get so much confused. This whole thing is the show LUT, which is the look development, which is probably the most fun part of color grading. It's making those images really shine and complement and enhance what the DP and the director had in mind. And then at a clip level, you will just balance the image, balance the shots to each other, so a scene makes sense. And the shots before or after make sense, which in this case I can show you, because depending in this very short sequence of shots, because of her this daylight, there's nothing artificial, there's nothing controlled, sorry. So the light changes as she goes up and up the mountain, and I'll show you the things that changes the most apart from the contrast and the exposure, is how the light hits the screens, and they look very different from shot to shot, and that had to be corrected for this scene to make sense, because although it's realistic that the sun dips in and out of clouds, and that affects the contrast and even the colors of things in the image, for the viewer it needs to make sense. Probably she took about 5 hours for this hike, and the real sequence on the film is about 10 seconds, 15 seconds. So in those 15 seconds, it needs to make sense. We cannot jump realistically from the first hour to the third hour with the sun was at a different position. So so this is where the clip level comes in. So for me, if we keep it super simple at clip level, it's exposure, just seeing what comes before and after. That's a quick way of doing it. If you go to here, split screen versions, and you can do neighboring clips. It could be what's around this clip, which is in this case is a very short sequence, so it will populate however many fit in a square, which are 4 in this case. It will highlight the one that we are selected and we can affect, just to make something very obvious. Let's get off the HDR. And you can see that change, but you can see that you can sort of, if you had a panel or you have an external monitor like bigger, you can, you can tweak here. You don't have to just dip in and out of this option. On external monitor, this will be big enough to see everything, the surroundings, and match in this case, apart from exposure and contrast, I needed to correct the grains, not specifically of the shot. But yeah, this is a good option for you to compare neighboring clips, or then you can just there's a lot of options like playhead, that's one other day, albums, or even clips. We have this one, and I want to compare it with the one. Let's do before and after. Yeah. So yeah, this is a really good comparing method for quickly visualizing all the clips at once, and you can still grade on the clips within this view, which is amazing for matching. So the exposure ratio is the level of contrast, balance. Let's go back to this example with the green. Balance, everything was colder. This is the vibe. I really like it cold as well. It's a completely different vibe. Probably, and as I said, these are vibes. Like I think the coldness. If you go, and it changes the story, right? I'm just looking at it. And for me, in this more sunny, if you will, more. Let me grab the vector scope so you can see what it's doing as well. Because it's important to too big. There we go. So for me, when I looked at it, I wanted, because there's not much development in the story in these 4 shots. I don't know the end of the story, so I think this cold look is really spot on. But for me, it's more like, I don't know if she's gonna make it. I don't know if this is a horror film, if there's something on the other side of the hill that's gonna attack her. I just don't know. So I think just by changing the color to more sunny, so by pushing those colors and those tungsten between yellows and reds, I think it brings hope to the story. I don't know, it just brings, she's going for a jolly, she's going for a nice hike, and admiring the views. Where maybe I'm in the wrong note. Maybe if I keep it cold like that, maybe and just maybe someone will come this way and push her, and that's the end of her story. But for me, this is, oh, what a lovely mountain. I think, I don't know, just you will feel it, you will tell the story you want to tell. But for me, colors they go hand in hand with emotions, and most of the time that's what, apart from making something look beautiful, that's what we're trying to reinforce, the intentions of the director and director of photography. So we're adding to that craft to really convey that story. For me, the story went on a happy note, and then I use HSV. I don't know if I touched on this before. There's many, Da Vinci's amazing. You have HSL, HSV, Lab, YUV, XYZ, OZ, and models. You can Google them. The HSV, the HSL, Lab, these are all different color and models. So in this case, HSV, which is hue, saturation, and value. So we have 3 channels. I've selected that, and then if you come here to channel, you have channel 1, 2, and 3, and the only channel that I want to affect is the second one, which is S, saturation, HSV, hue, saturation, and value. I only wanted to change saturation. The good thing about this model, so the way you cranked that S value, or the channel 2, is not by saturating here. If you do this, weird things start to happen because this is a different model. So in this case, HSV, the saturation is changed with the gain value. Yeah. So obviously, that's exaggerate. Of course, it's horrible. But what I want you to notice, and I can do another video comparing different types of saturating colors, but also making them a bit deeper. And that's how film works. If you want a more saturated color, it will not be brighter and lighter. It will be more saturated, for a better word, and deeper, like, if you will, a bit darker. But anyway, I didn't want to introduce any saturation. I like it a bit desat and add it or reduce it as a whole for the whole film of the whole scene. Usually, for it's for the whole film, but sometimes, some overall looks don't work for interiors or an exteriors. Let's say this is a scene, and I can add this scene into a new group. Let's call it hike. Yeah. So now this is telling me that they all ganged together and they are part of a group. And you can see up here that more dots appeared. We're still on clip. At the very end, we have still the timeline, but in between we have group pre-clip and post-clip. But if I knew that I want not necessarily a whole development for the whole film would work, most of the time is idea, but sometimes they are so different. Let's say, even let's not think so much about drama films, but documentaries where you have the interviews that are shot like yesterday. You have stock footage, you have historical footage, you have what they call recreations, like when they recreate a scene. The recreation scenes have to be, I don't know what I'm thinking about, crimes or whatever, more moody, in the darker tones, and the interview, the workshop with the different camera and the development. So you know what I mean. You have, at least on this hypothetical documentary, you have interviews, stock or historical or archival B-roll, and recreational scenes that are shot right now. So we have we can group all these three different things, and here in post group, so each group will have this sort of overall. So whatever I do here, again, just add this blue, so this all be affected. And if I bring let's bring more from this is a scene just before going to the hike, etc., etc. So if I were to gang them all together into add into a new group, pre-hike or post-hike, I don't know. Anyway, so this is, I select this show me that all these are ganged together. I click on any of these and these all gang together. So if I come here and I'll push towards the other side, so to make it different, so I'm affecting the overall of this group but not this group. Yes, still I probably would come here and delete that, so to speak we have a clip level, all the matching and correcting things, and a timeline, or in this case group post clip. I have all my look dev per scene. In this case, horrible, but this is just to make a huge difference between what it can be done. Again, when you have different things that not necessarily respond to the same look development, you can start grouping things like this and still have this option of working at clip level and working in the overall level. So if you will, in this case, as I showed before, this is more like having different adjustment layers on top of different scenes, and you still have an overall thing. If you want to add grain for the whole video, or certain contrast that will unify everything, all those little nuances that will, despite an exterior interior completely different, time and place, whatever, that little ingredient that will unify the whole film and make it feel more organic throughout, you still come to the timeline level and add that thing to I don't know if it shows. Let's adjust, let's soften it up, little contrast, so it will add that very soft contrast throughout the whole film. So yeah, those are more options for you to have in your bag. Probably I'm covering too much, but I don't care. I'm giving you all my knowledge, or at least 90%. I keep the other 10 so I can keep my job. Kidding. Cool. Where were we? So let me show you a few things. The grains, I spoke quite a lot about grains. So this is without retouching the grain, and you can see in the next shot, or even the previous shot, I didn't touch on the grains, but you can see what these two match perfectly without. You can see the same path, right? And you can see that at the same time, just different angle, so it's just probably a 30 seconds just running closer to her, getting that shot of her walking away. Bridge crouched down and pointing up, where this one was on the other side, sort of here of the hill. But this one just quite doesn't match. On this case, I had to lift those greens. Let's do again that comparison by selecting the clips. There you go. So let me go full screen and see if I can enable and disable. Yes. So yeah, that was originally a bit darker. You can see here it could have been up here when she got up here, and and the clouds are just, the sun is just not hitting there because there's a cloud here as well, right? So it doesn't matter for me. You don't get this detail when you're looking at an image. You are looking at her and the views, and around her this is the green, and for me this is closer than this, which is closer to up here, and probably you missed that up here was this dark compared to this section. So that that's my thinking as well. We're looking at her, we're looking at the view, that vantage point, we looking at her going, but we never pay attention to the top right of the image and say, oh, there's not enough time to read that either. And then when we cut to the close-up, which was probably done up here with this little hill to the right, then it becomes a bit darker. So for me it needs to make sense to these surroundings, although it makes sense realistically to this top. So that's how I see things that should be color graded. So there with the green, and that's about it. There's something else I wanted to explain, because I had a chat with one of our editors last week or a couple of weeks ago, depending when I'm releasing this video, about this. Trying to he comes from a Premiere Pro and After Effects background, even Photoshop, that are layer based, so you get some time for you to understand nodes. Again, it's visually we're coming here from our very log image that we're moving into certain color space, which is DaVinci Intermediate. We're creating a framework for us to work in certain way, and the way these wheels feel and the knobs, that it will replicate across whichever, if we're working with log, if we're working with Rec 09, or even cameras, S-Log, log 3 or log 4 now with the arrays or red, everything will have the same sensitivity. So yeah, so we're creating that, all this sandwiched until we get to the ODT. And these for me are two branches which are primaries, which is just to make the corrections, and I use mostly this for secondaries. This is quickly just reduce those, probably this will show better, reduce those harsh highlights, softening, if you will, the image. I have a gradient, so I think it brings more contrast to the peaks and the clouds, and I think this is quite high compared to the rest of the image, and I want to bring it together a bit more. The greens are explained. In this case, they were this dark at this point, at the very end shot. If we go back to this start, yeah, and you can see how dark they got, and I want them to be believable with what we've seen before, despite if it is true or not, depending what the day is doing. And then this. So the editor I was talking about asked me about this secondary branch and this parallel mixer here. But these, my primaries and my secondaries, will get together here, and from then on I will have a modifier or two, maybe nothing, and go straight into my look dev. So the question was, what happens, what's the difference between here and here? Well, on a nutshell, and that's why the secondaries don't come after the primaries in that sense, but they live in a parallel world, because I want to get the best out of the image, or the most detail. Yeah, let's think this way. So this is a raw file. This is what lives in this node, what lives here. Yeah. So on the top branch, I'm doing my primary: exposure, ratio, balance, and saturation. And then if I were to continue with my secondaries after, like straight after, my secondaries will be affected to up to the point I got here. And as the first example, and I don't want to focus on her bottom, but you know, on the logo, we can see even like marks there, apart from these creases. And I lost it by doing that. So maybe if I want to do this, in this case, it wouldn't make sense. But sometimes if you want to act on the secondaries, if you do it after this first branch here, or if you wouldn't have a parallel, you can continue now serial by serial, that would have been lost and probably non-recoverable. Well, in this case, my secondaries are feeding from the very rawest, so to speak, the log image that we shot. That being said, so what I added, and I didn't replicate it to the other grades, but I just left it here for you to see this as an example. I created this, I called it sand. I don't know if you can see here, I'm tackling the highlights. I'm giving them a bit of a more tungsten-y feel. So I'm enhancing. I'm going with the idea of it's sunny, it's warm, everything is fine, and it's not so cold. And so what's the difference between doing it here at the very end or doing it here? And let me just create a blank note. I'm gonna disable it first. I'm gonna copy, paste, and I'm gonna come to my gallery. I'm gonna activate the one at the very end, grab still, deactivate it, and activate the same effect on here on the secondary branch. You can already see, I'm gonna hide this. I'm gonna toggle on and off our results with it at the end, but you could already see, if you were looking at the viewer, the change. So this is with the tungsten just on the highlights at the end, and this is how we got it now. Here the effect is the same, but it's being applied to more parts of the image rather than just the highlights. Yeah, I'm gonna toggle it back and forth, so it's more in the highlights and the mids, and I tell you what is happening here. I prefer it this way, just a touch on the highlights. So what I'm doing here, this is just a LUT that's called sand, and it really makes the whole image. Let me just grab it. I spent quite a long time like cataloging all the things I use the most, and you can see my look development. I got a lot. And this one day I'll just put it in a package and I'm gonna sell them as people do online. I was talking about sand. I got blue tones and sand, and I think this was sand 1, but anyway, let me disable that and just drop it straight as it is. So that's the effect. It's just a lot, the effect. It makes everything sandy. Yeah, really tungsten. I really like how this LUT works. It's for some moods and things. Maybe it's too much here or no, I don't know, depending your grade, whatever you want to do. What I did was I applied it here. This is half. I wanted you to concentrate on this image. So this is my qualification, right? So what I did, let me go to the one I actually wanted to do, which is this one. As you saw, we have that very strong LUT. I halved it, so half of the key output, and then I qualified here just on luminance. So I'm disabling hue and saturation. I don't want them to intervene, just luminance, so I have a really nice clean qualification. And yeah, I just qualified. Let me bring this to 1 so you can see this a bit better. So I just qualified those highlights, the ones that I wanted to qualify, maybe even less, just like that. And I added a bit of denoise and blur, so everything's very, very clean. And let me go back to the output and have it, just a kiss. Cool. So because this node here is a combination of all this exposure, which I'm bringing exposure quite a lot down, the contrast where I'm crunching the lows and the mids. In this case, yeah, balance doesn't matter. So, but yeah, I warm things up. All of this plus all that I did here will be mixed here, and this is sort of the result. Yeah. So if I were to add a blank, this is the result. This is this plus this will mix into here. So whatever happens here, it will have all these things applied. So that being said, because there's more blacks in the image, there's more contrast. When I go to the qualification, it will react in a different way, because if I come here and I see this qualification, yeah, so this is just the qualification, yeah, exactly the same key output, exactly the same qualification, nothing changes. The difference, and we can see it here, is because this is the result of everything, there's more blacks, there's more contrast, so the qualification is more precise, if you will. Well, on this one, because the image comes from the log side, it's qualifying, sorry, wrong shortcut, it's qualifying on this. So again, to do more visual, with this node I'm qualifying on this image, and on this node I'm qualifying on this one. So it's so much flatter that that same qualification is grabbing more luminance values. Cool, so this wraps up our first clip and timeline video. The next time I'm gonna be just concentrating on the timeline level and explaining a little bit of look development, or how did I do it on this specific occasion. Until next time, bye!